When it comes to the current trends that we're seeing, this increase in transgender, especially youths,
Mhm.
what's your assessment of the situation? Why do you think it is that we've had such a rapid increase in that happening?
Right. Yeah. So I wrote that Quillette article that you mentioned on that. And if we look at it historically, well, so let's step back. Let's look at brain patterns that I mentioned before, where you take a 10-year-old, you can predict 93% of the time whether it's a boy or a girl. If you take an adult, you can predict 95% of the time whether it's a man or a woman. So the brain patterns for guys are kind of bunched up in this area, but there are some individuals that kind of go out on the curve. So there are guys that have female typical brain patterns, not a lot of them, but they're there. And there are girls who have, and women who have male typical brain patterns. So it's not, kind of out of bounds to think, well, maybe for whatever reason, um, you didn't see the sex typical shift in brain development for whatever reason. So you're going to get. It would make sense that you have some guys who really like girl things, but they're kind of forced to be boys and to do boy things, and they would develop gender dysphoria. And the same thing for some girls. And so if we look at early transsexual in individuals, they had a pattern of sex atypical play. So the boys are playing and liked girl things and so forth, expressed wanting to be a girl, had this dysphoria, depression, and discomfort with being a boy or girl, if it's the reverse of that. In those individuals, if they're carefully screened and so forth, would be fairly rare. But if they transition, most of them do okay. They're okay with it. So the detransition rates are 1 or 2%. So it's like, yeah, it worked for them. But now, jump forward to the last, well, it started maybe 20 years ago, but especially the last 10 years or so, the number of individuals who are claiming to be transgender has really spiked, way beyond the numbers you would expect based on these brain patterns, for example. And the demographics of these individuals have changed as well. Typically, it was disproportionately more men than women, and they had a history of gender dysphoria. Now we're getting more women, especially adolescents, than men. And most of them, as far as I know, don't. I mean, some of them do, but a lot of them don't have this history of gender dysphoria and sex atypical play patterns and other sorts of things that have historically been reliable markers of transgender issues and doing well with the transition if that's what they chose to do. So there's been this huge spike, as you know, and it's been argued that social media has driven a lot of it, and I think that's right. And I argued that um, adolescent girls in particular may be at risk for these negative social media influences, um, because during that time, early adolescence, late adolescence, they're really trying to develop this social support network. They're really trying to develop this, a couple of BFFs and feel included and integrated and socially supported and emotionally supported and so forth. That's a really important thing. Now, guys go through a similar thing where they want to be part of a bigger group that works together and so forth. But the girl networks, I think, are more susceptible to social contagion and going along with ideas that maybe aren't a good idea just to fit in and to be part of the group and not to get excluded or rejected from the group, which is a bigger concern for girls than it is for boys. And so I think we have a recipe for, combine that with social media and all the media attention, general media attention to these issues. It's now become a political signal rather than a kind of a personal desire. It's like you support this because you support all progressive sorts of things, or you're against it because you're against all progressive sorts of things. It's really created an environment that I think is going to be detrimental and is being detrimental to a lot of adolescents and young adults, especially girls.
And this would explain why you have seen a sex difference in the number of F to M as opposed to M to F transitions, right, or desires for transition, because you would presume that there's a left-handedness argument that gets used. I'm not sure if you've heard this used before, where during the Middle Ages, people that were left-handed were seen as more likely to be witches. So people hid the fact that they were left-handed. I think it was around about 2% of people a few hundred years ago said that they were, whereas now it's around about it's the teens percent, I think, of the population that are left-handed. So the argument is, when you stop demonizing people for being their true self, being fully left-handed, or being a male that identifies as a female, or vice versa, that people open up. That would be the explanation for why you would see this rampant increase, the fact that we are more, as a society, more accepting of it. But that wouldn't explain why you have this massive increase in F to M as opposed to M to F. And
that's right.
This sex difference appears to be explained away largely by the raw materials that we went through, women's desire to fit in, their greater social cue, ability to absorb that. It also explains why you don't have a completely random distribution of people across the entire United States. One person out of every 10 schools, one girl out of every 10 schools, one male out of every 30 schools, let's say, across the US. It's 5 girls in one class that all sit at the same table together during lunch.
That's right. Yeah. You see these clusters, or in one school district, I think 10% of the kids, I don't remember what the male-female breakdown was, claim to be transgender or non-binary or something, which makes no sense. The other issue that has changed is the regret and detransition rates are going up from fairly rare 1-2% or so to depending on what you look at, the stopping of hormonal treatment can be 1 out of 3 or so. So the rates of people kind of changing their mind is going up, suggesting that the transgender, the dysphoria, so forth, wasn't really related to that. It was due to some other issue.
What I find particularly fascinating and kind of morbidly ironic about this situation is that the biological sex differences that men and women have are providing the raw materials to cause increasing volumes of men and women to recant their own sex, or at least their own gender identity. So it's almost like the supply and demand of what's going on is happening in a community of people that deny that there are any sex differences.
Yeah, it's a mess. So right. So yeah. So you're saying that the adolescent girls' susceptibility to social contagion has a biological basis to it, which I think it does. And that biological basis makes them more prone to claim that they're really a guy. Yeah,
and deny that there are any sex differences,
and deny that they're yeah. It is. It's amazing. People can spin stories for sure.
What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full unedited episode, and don't forget to subscribe. Peace.